My name is Susan Snyder, and I'm the Associate Curator here at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and welcome. Magdalena Kusserow was born in Bochum, Germany on January 23, 1924. When Magdalena was 7 years old, her family moved to the small town of Bad Lippspringe in Germany. The arrow on the map points to the approximate location. Thank you. Magdalena came from a large family of 11 children. Her father was a retired postal official and her mother was a teacher. Her parents were active in their region, distributing religious literature and teaching Bible classes in their home. These photos are of Magdalena's parents. This is the last photo taken of her family of 11 children in Bad Lippspringe in 1935. Magdalena is seated in the front row, second from the left. This is a photo of the Kusserow home. Their house was conveniently located for fellow Jehovah's Witnesses on a tram route connecting two cities. You can see that the house was adorned with two signs, one which read, "Read the Golden Age." When Magdalena was 12, she joined her parents and sister in missionary work. This photo shows the family car that was used to distribute religious literature, which, if you see the case on the car, that's where they housed the material. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Magdalena's parents were arrested. The Kusserow home was searched many times by the Gestapo, and in 1939, the police took Magdalena's three youngest siblings to be, quote, re-educated, unquote, in Nazi foster homes. In April 1941, Magdalena was arrested and detained in nearby juvenile prisons until she was 18 years. Magdalena was told she could go home if she signed a statement repudiating her faith. She refused and was deported to the Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany. The location of Ravensbrück again is indicated on the map. Within a year, her mother and sister Hildegard were also sent to Ravensbrück. In this historic photograph, you can see women performing slave labor at the camp. This is a letter that was sent from Magdalena to her sister Anna Marie, who at the time was herself in prison in Berlin for the same crime. You will notice the letter has been censored. This photo is of Magdalena's concentration camp identification card from Ravensbrück, dated February of 1945. During a forced march from Ravensbrück in April of 1945, Magdalena, her sister, and mother were liberated by the Russians. Magdalena returned to her home in Germany. As she explained, she does not feel hatred against anybody for what her family went through. She hates bad behavior, but not men. 5 years after the war, Magdalena married a man who had been a soldier in Hitler's army, and she currently lives in Spain today, where she has lived for 30 years. Please help me in welcoming Magdalena Kusserow. Magdalena, I just wanted to start by saying that obviously you're very heroic to many people in this audience, and you're heroic to me too, because I have been at the museum for 15 years and have come to know you through your artifacts, and this is the first time I've actually been able to meet you, so I'm honored.
I'm too.
I wondered if you could start out by telling us about your pre-war family life, what your life was like growing up in a big family, full of life and energy.
Yeah, I very often tell about my time when I was a child. We had such a nice remembrance, and so many. I remember, for example, my father. He was concerned that we learned also music. Everybody had to learn an instrument. I learned violin, and in the evening, as we had no television, I don't know, it's good thing or bad thing, and and one way I'm sure it's good. Then my father had was concerned to maintain us occupied. And in the evenings we made concert with many instruments. So the neighbors, sometimes they came, they listened under the window outside. It was very nice. Also the neighbor, we had a good relationship with all our neighbors. And naturally, my father taught us the Bible also. Every morning or evening, once a day at least, we sat together in the table and he asked us questions. He let us to make us questions. He said, you had no questions several days. Think about what don't you understand? And then we had to paint some pictures, biblical pictures from the Revelation. Sometimes we have to laugh. It was really a nice family life.
I was looking at some of your photographs before this event this morning, and I noticed that even in the 30s, with the pressure from the Nazi Party to cease and desist activities related to Jehovah's Witnesses, your family still maintained an active life and practiced the religion of the Jehovah's Witness. Can you talk a little bit about how the pressure affected your family and when the detaining started with your family?
Yeah. And I would say in my case it started more or less when I was 12 years old at school. So as we saw before, we had to say Heil Hitler. And my father, he taught us. He said, what does it mean, Heil? And he read us in Acts 4:12, there is no Heil or salvation and nobody but in Jesus Christ. And so, but he said, if you say Heil Hitler or no, as you matter, it must come out of your heart, not because Papa or Mama said so. And so I felt it was a worship, like a worship, so I refused. And the teacher, he would beat me and force me, and so it was one by one, verse and verse. And I left the school then with 40 years, my time was over. But the three youngest one, the smallest one, Paul Gerhard, he was 7 years old, the other 9, and Elisabeth was 13 years.
That's your 3 youngest siblings.
Yes, the youngest one. And then one day the police came and took them out of the school and brought them in a reform school. And to make it short, there were until, this was 39, and until 1945, when the war ends, and then they came home. So nearly 7 years we had few contact with them.
You had 3 brothers who were detained or arrested in the mid to late 30s. One of them actually died in 1937, but you explained to me that he was still detained. Can you describe what happened to your other 2 brothers?
Wilhelm, he was the eldest one. He got the invitation to go to the war, and he refused. Before he went, he was not so convinced, but later on he was so convinced. He said, if they invite me, or if I get the letter, and then I will not go. And then he get a letter, it was 1940 about, and he should be on the train station in Paderborn, and he went. He said in the train station, he will not go to the military. And then the officer said, then you take the next train, you go to Münster, to the judge, and then he went by his own to Münster, and then they arrested him, and a half year later he was condemned to death, and they shot him.
Your papers that you have donated to the museum indicate that a Dr. Rohr was a court-appointed lawyer who stepped in and tried to help Wilhelm, in fact, writing to your mother and asking her to speak with Wilhelm, maybe convincing him to renounce his faith. Can you talk a little bit about what she did?
Yeah, my father was already arrested, and my mother was fighting alone with all the children. But she was very concerned that they maintain faithfully. He never would say to my brother, go to the war. He was so concerned until we get the last letter. And then the last letter said, yesterday or this morning I had my court case and they condemned me to death. Please visit me again. And then the other day my mother said to me, Magdalena, come with me and we will visit Wilhelm. And there was Wilhelm. He was a little bit pale and half a year always, but he was so strong. And my mother would give him some juice, to drink, to strengthen him. He said, no, I don't need it anymore. And so my mother, we dismissed and went home, and she spoke with a lawyer if it is possible to bury him in Bad Springer. At least, my mother said, the people should know why he died. I will bury my son in Bad Springer. And we got it. One week later, he was shot. We got the letter. And then my mother relaxed. She said, now he cannot be any more unfaithful. He died faithfully.
Can you talk about Can you also talk about what happened to you? At first you were in prison, then you were deported, and who were you with during that time period?
When
you were arrested, when you yourself were arrested for not renouncing the faith.
Yes, we were the last one. My father was 2 times already arrested. He came home without any, what is that, to firma.
Thank you. Without any sign?
Yes, so he didn't sign it. So
without signing, yes.
So without signing.
So he refused to sign.
So he didn't sign. And he came home the 3rd time, and then 3 months or 4 months, we were together arrested. It was in April 1941. But they left me home. They said, you are too young. For the reform school I was too old, and for the prison I was too young. So I was alone in the big house. I cried a little bit, sure. But then a couple of days, about 1 week later, they took me also along. And so I was relaxed. I said, well, what should I do alone and home? And they brought me to prison, together with my parents and Hildegard. One sister was still there, but they wouldn't put us together in one room. Of course, we were a time in a prison, we 4, my parents, Hildegard and me, and everyone in another room. And then they condemned me later on for 6 months prison juvenile.
Can you describe the differences between being in the prison and then being deported to Ravensbrück? What was your life like in the camp versus the prison?
In the prison is more organized. But then, we had to work also. I was 4 months in a cell, in a room,
in a cell?
In the cell, alone without any communication. But this was also not so easy. But then the time was over. The woman called me the supervisor, she said, come, tomorrow you can go home. But I have here from the Gestapo, you have to sign, and then you can home. And so I told her, if I sign, I would not be necessary to be half a year in a prison, only to sign. Then I could sign before. No, I will not sign. Yeah. And I explained it to her. I said, so I will maintain faithful to Jehovah. I will not sign that Hitler is a savior. Okay. She nearly cried. She said, I'm so sorry, but tomorrow I have to bring you to the Gestapo and to Bielefeld, and then I went to the Gestapo, and the Gestapo again this paper to sign, and I didn't. Then he said, okay, you stay 4 months more here until you are 18 years old, because I was 17, 18 years, and then you go to the concentration camp.
And at that point, was your mother and Hildegard already deported?
They were already condemned, because we had a special court with 4 of us. My father, they condemned him for 15 years, and 10 years and 5 years, something. And my mother for 2.5 years, and Hildegard for 1 year, I think. And then after 1 year, Hildegard the same, and she came in concentration camp. They brought her in concentration camp. And then after my mother had the time over, and she came also. They brought her also to the concentration camp.
So you were reunited then in Ravensbrück?
Yes, a time at least. First Hildegard, they assigned her to another concentration camp, to Sachsenhausen, to a family, a Nazi family. But I was together with my mother, at least a couple of months. And then they assigned me to another house to clean the house of a Nazi, and we were again divided.
I just wanted to remind you, if you have questions, please write them down on cards, and people will pick them up so that we can ask Magdalena a few questions if we have time. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your day-to-day life in Ravensbrück and how spirituality played into the day, and
the life in Ravensbrück.
Ravensbrück, right? Your daily life, but also your spirituality in the camp.
Mm-hmm. So when I brought me, the only thing I was concerned, how can I meet my brothers and my sisters, spiritual sisters? And when they brought me in, immediately one came, she saluted me, was one of our city, Louise Jandorf. We had here the purple triangle from her, it was the number of her. And then later on also Gertrude Pötzinger, another prisoner, she took me along, she showed me, she informed me. But the life in concentration camp, we get up about 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning, and they brought us our breakfast. That means a little bit coffee. It was not coffee, but something like this. And bread. We cut it in 10 slices. The table were always 10, and so in the morning this was. And I also left my bread for evening. As my mother said, if you have few to eat it slowly and chew
well, right?
Chew well. And so in the evening I went to bed and ate my piece of bread, was not so much. But then after we went to roll call. It's known, the roll call. Sometimes 1 hour, sometimes 2, sometimes 5 hours we had to stay there. And after then we went direct to the work. And evening we came back. and the same procedure.
How did you maintain your faith? How did you keep from having despair?
Yeah, it was a time was mostly because as they put us mostly was a time they separated us in different barracks. But mostly we were together with all Jehovah's Witnesses, and we maintained us. We had our conversation, and when they killed my brother Wolfgang, he was beheaded. They took me aside, they explained me, and they helped me because I was the youngest one, and so we maintained us quite well.
Did you read the Bible? Often I've read that people clandestinely had Bibles in the camp.
Yeah.
Was there material available for you?
It was a time we got the Watchtower, and my mother, as she was very intelligent, I remember she read the Watchtower, but we never saw it. We don't know from where it came and where it and during the roll call, when there were no soldier, no SS, she told it one by one. And then sometimes we learned, I remember, Psalm 83, we learned by heart, one by one. So we maintained us. And the Bible, I never saw in Ravensbrück the Bible, but they had some pages. And secretly in the evening we some read one page or some chapters. So, but I don't know who was it.
Also, you talk about your spiritual sisters that were in the camp with you.
Yes.
Was there an instant companionship with them because of the persecution of all of you? Was there friendship? Were there ever issues of problems amongst you, or you worked together?
Generally, we had a good spirit, I have to say. And we went together, we helped us one another, and I don't remember even, maybe I was the youngest one, they didn't even tell me, but generally it was very, very good spirit. They helped me and we helped one another. We changed sometimes some food, some they had more, some, because it was in the time they gave us special work and we had some to eat maybe more than the other one. And so we changed it. I remember then was no restriction anymore to get parcels from home. The first parcel one person get in our block, it was like this, and she opened it. And they looked, after so many time, to see something of butter or something this, and so they looked, we were happy, and she gave, was not enough, of course, but we saw it at least.
But you shared. Can you describe your liberation, the actual liberation, and making your way back home? What liberation was like for you emotionally?
If I tell you everything, I need hours, but it was really interesting. I was in the house of official the last half year, and then he was from Bavaria, a high officer, with his family, because they brought their family close to Ravensbrück, to the camps, knowing that the bombs will not come in the camps, and so the families, they brought them in. The men, they worked in the government in Berlin. But then one day he came, he said, Magdalena, we trust you, I give you the key, we go in vacation, and you stay here. They gave me some work to do, and so. But he said, don't let in nobody. Nobody has the right to come in this house. And he made a tour with me around the house, and he said, here's your clothes, and this your clothes, and so on.
So when he said that he was going on vacation, he was fleeing.
Yeah, they fled, of course.
And then you were liberated. The camp was liberated.
But I was not, he ordered another officer, he observed me. And then one day my mother came. She was in another house. She said, Magdalena, the Russian coming, we heard the bombs, I will not let you alone. You are young. I said, Mama, you cannot stay here. They will kill us. No, I will not leave you here. What should I do? I went to telephone. I phoned the commander, Suren, the Lagerkommandant.
The camp commander?
Yeah. I said, look at my mother is here. The bombs come. Can she sleep one night here? Okay, let her sleep. So we were going to prepare the bed, but my mother said, no. We go to our sisters, that we stay together. So we closed the door and went to the concentration camp. And there they were already fired up to go to the death march. And then we were about 3 days on the death march. Then the Russian came.
So the Nazis actually started to move you out of the camp away from the Russians, and you were put on a death march.
Yeah.
And liberated from?
Yeah, about 3 or 4 days we were, and then the Russian came, they liberated us. But we were not yet free, because we didn't know even where we are, and where we should go, and we had nothing. And the Russians said, go home, finish the war, and then we had some problems. It's too long to tell all the story. But anyway, it lasts still for 5 months. It was the end of April, and we reached home in September, so 5 months.
And during this time period, you wore the coat, your concentration camp coat, part of the time period while you were walking, trying to get your jackets.
No, I had already private, because the neighbors, they shouldn't see, and the friends said I'm prisoner. But some they had still their coats. Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Why should they not see that you were a prisoner? How did Germans react to that? If they saw you wearing your concentration camp jacket?
Yeah, they won't distinguish us. The only religion group that they had their own sign, the purple triangle. These were Jehovah's Witnesses, to distinguish us.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, every member of your family, your parents, the 11 children, were persecuted, arrested, detained in some manner. How did you reconnect with them after the war? How did you rebuild your lives? Can you talk a little bit about that?
We came home. My father thought maybe we are not alive anymore, because past 5 months, and my mother and me, we were not there. But then we reached. And Paul Gerhard, the youngest one, he was still with family, and close to the concentration camp Wewelsburg. And the Jehovah's Witnesses from Wewelsburg, they knew that Paul Gerhard must be there. And Paul Gerhard didn't even know that the war was over. He was, and then some of friends, Jehovah's Witnesses, they took a big car, I don't know, was it from the SS or something, and they went to Sillinghausen, a small village, and then they looked there, they called, listen, boy, is here a small boy in this village who reads the Bible? He said, this am I. And then they said, come, you are free. Dismiss yourself, take your things, and then they took him with this big car to the concentration camp in Wewelsburg. That's why one picture and one book, there is Paul Gerhard between all the prisoners as boy. And he said, because our family was not yet home, so he was about 2 weeks with our brothers there in Wewelsburg, and then they brought him home. And then one by one came home. Karl-Heinz, he was very, very sick. My father then came infirmary, no?
Yes.
She came to my father. She said, "Look at your son is there. He cannot go for his own." Then he came home. My father nearly didn't recognize. He died then 1 year later. And then one by one, and we were the last one. We came home, and with Louise Jandorf and the daughter. And Louise Jandorf, the daughter, was still, she was not in prison, she was a girl. And she said, Louise Jandorf said, "Let us go down here from the tramway, because you don't even know if your house is still there. You go, I'm sure my daughter is here." And we went off from the tramway and went in that house. It was just opposite from the street. She was the daughter. And then she said, "Your family is just here." And we ran home. And I saw all my brothers and sisters. I mixed the names up because small Paul Gerhard was already from 7 to 14 years. And
he grew, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure. And it was and then my father said, we are going ahead. We don't think about what's behind us, and we made our life.
And you made your life. Tell me about your faith, the faith of family after the war.
This was the faith, you asked.
The faith. Mm-hmm.
The faith, yeah. And it was Friday. We were two days without sleeping, Friday. And Sunday, my father said, "No, Sunday we are preaching. We're going preaching from house to house." And then we went. Yeah.
Did anyone in the family waver from this? Did anyone question the religion, thinking that because they had been persecuted as Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, we are all happy. My father made a poem here with all the families. He said, "If Mother and Magdalena are coming, they sang us a song and everything." No, we maintained the faith, and after half a year, our society, the Watchtower Society, was reorganized, and then we got the letter. My father got the letter. Now we can maintain a full-time servant. They call it pioneers or full-time servant. And 2 I can maintain for preaching work. And so he said, "Okay, Hildegard and Magdalena, you 2. And then Elisabeth, she cried. She said, "I was always with Magdalena together. Let me." Okay, Hildegard, Magdalena, Elisabeth, full-time servant, and Waltraud and Hildegard continued with the music study, because the master, the teacher, the pianist, he came immediately. He said, "Mr. Kusserow, let your daughters continue with their study." And they did it. They maintained their life later on with music teachers until the
So today, how many of your brothers and sisters, your immediate family, are still alive?
Now there are only the smallest boys, the 2 boys, Hans Werner and Paul Gerhard, and me. My sister Annemai, she passed away 1 year ago with 92 years. She was very...
Can you tell me a little bit, can you tell the audience a little bit about what you've done since the war, what you did after the war?
After the war?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I told, and then they called me to the branch office, to Bethel in Germany, in Wiesbaden it was, and gave me a work with a brother and friend. He had the shipping, and I was like his secretary. And then after 2 years we married. It's like it was George Reuter. And as we don't maintain any hate against our opposite, my husband was a soldier before, the soldier under Hitler, but he was already then Jehovah's Witness when I met him in Bethel. And we married, we continued full-time service, and we were missionaries. We went to Africa, to Togo for years, later on to Luxembourg, and now we are already, my husband passed away 9 years ago, and we were already 30 years in Spain preaching, continuing. Now I'm in the branch office in Bethel, they call it, in Bethel in Madrid.
Okay. Magdalena, your story is fascinating, and we have excerpts on our website in case you would like to learn more about her family members, since she's been involved with the museum for some 16 years. So I wanted to ask you some questions, though, that the audience has written down on cards. So the first is, was your family aware of what was happening to other groups targeted by the Nazis?
To
other victims groups targeted by the Nazis, that were persecuted by the Nazis?
Yeah, what they did? We were together with them. You
were together with them?
Yes, in a concentration camp we had a good relation with them also with the Jews. Many of them they killed later on. We saw the trucks came with the 5 lights and taking the Jews away. Later on in Ravensbrück they had their own crematorium. We had a good relation.
And how did other prisoners treat you in the camps, being a Jehovah's Witness? Did they treat you differently because you were a witness?
No, I had a good relation with them. I had no problem.
How about in the prison? You described your experiences in the prison as being, we were with the criminals, general criminals in the prisons. Did they treat you differently because you were a Jehovah's Witness?
No, I had not. I was once, when I was in prison, together with a teacher, a lady. She was Catholic, but she helped me. She later on, when she were released, it was in Bielefeld. She wrote me a letter. Last week I found this letter from her. They were the criminals. Yeah, no, I had no much problem with them.
And this question is, was there a particular scripture or phrase that strengthened you while you were in Ravensbrück?
Particular?
Scripture or phrase, a passage. Mm-hmm.
The Bible scripture?
Mm-hmm. Something that kept you strong.
Yeah, something what my father also always said, like Proverbs 27:11. Make my heart happy, says Jehovah, so that I can be wise, my son, make my heart happy. So by our faithfulness, we made the heart of Jehovah happy, so Jehovah can answer Satan, the devil. He is a liar. Jehovah has people who can answer him.
Magdalena, I've had a request that can you say something in Spanish for the brothers and sisters who are here today and who speak Spanish?
Now, about my life?
Something brief, maybe, just greeting them. I think they would appreciate that.
Espero que todos habéis entendido lo que he dicho en inglés. Inglés más difícil, pero estoy muy contenta de estar en España, en Bethel, y the brothers están muy contentos que podemos buena relación. Yo trabajo en la costura 5 horas cada día para arreglar las cosas para nuestros hermanos allí. estoy muy contenta. Si querés, voy a llevar saludos a España.
The last question I'll ask is really two different participants in the audience had asked this. So the first asked, what helped you most persevere during the Nazi persecution, and what encouragement could you offer to the audience today?
The most what was helping me, first of all, if my parents teached us as childhood on. There's many things I remember from child until today. Sometimes I said, my mother would say this, my father would say, and Bible reading, and my father asked us to learn by heart many Bible texts and also personality. I remember I was about 7 years old. Then my mother was cleaning in the kitchen. I would like to help her. She said, now listen, Magdalena, I will tell you the 12 sons of Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, etc. Learn it. She learned, she showed me. And then she said, now you go to Elizabeth and the room and learn it with her. And this means that the mother herself must know it first. And this was a big help until today. If I read something in the Bible about Manasseh or this, I immediately, this is from the tribe of this, from Judah, from this or this. This is a big help, and it helps me. I could recommend it everybody that they should read the Bible every day, at least a little bit.
Magdalena, it's our tradition here at the Holocaust Museum that when we do first person, we allow the survivor to have the last word. So if you would like to, if there's anything you'd like to add or say, we would like you to do so now. Anything. We just allow
for you,
for the audience, for something that you want to say about your experience that we might not have covered.
I appreciate very much about the program today. Also, Mr. Meinhofer did it very well, and you did it very well, and they helped me, and Carrie did it
yes,
before.
But it's actually not about thanking us. We're immensely grateful to you that you came to us today, and we want you to have every opportunity to be able to speak about your experiences. So we are grateful to you more than you can even imagine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.